lens here so we can get it popping. And we're gonna get straight into it. I am this was overdue. This was supposed to be done last week. Hopefully my moderators are on board. I'm hoping my moderator uh Agatha's here. Um because this is a black topic. Like as always, I invite everyone to the chat. But this is a black topic just because often when people not part of the not part of the tribe talk about it, um, they miss some of the finer details. Or unfortunately, some folks, what's up, Carlton? Or unfortunately, some of the folks who aren't part of the tribe, kind of misdirect the conversation. So again, I invite everyone to the party. Everyone's invited to the chat, but um, I do want some black folks to tap in. I want to get their opinions and thoughts on this. So let's talk about black fatigue. This has been talked about in the last few weeks. Now, unbeknownst to me, um, there was a white lady that talked about this, and I guess this has triggered some people, which I don't know why, because this conversation started within the black community years and years ago. There was literally a book written about this 5 years ago, and this has been talked about. Comedians have been making jokes about this since the '90s. Chris Rock literally launched his internet. He was already like famous as a comedian, and like a beginning, like had a few acting roles. But 1996, his stand up special, Bring the Pain, when he talked about black fatigue, is what launched his career into the stratosphere. Um, People who aren't familiar with that, I think Bring the Pain is probably here on YouTube. If not, um, you can check the other streaming services to see if they are if it's available. But it's from 1996, so I'm pretty sure you can find it somewhere for free. If it's not on YouTube, I don't think it's on Netflix just because it's so old. But you can check there. Carlin says that comedy special took him to the next level. Yeah, it really did. And he talked about black fatigue way back then. It wasn't called black fatigue, but it was the same thing. He was saying there was a war against black people and ninjas got to go. He's like, I wish I could join the Ku Klux Klan. I'd do a drive by on them myself. But this is not a new conversation within the black community. Um, so I don't know why people's feathers are rough. It seems what it is that a lot of black people get butt hurt when non-black people talk about things that we already agree upon, right? That's what it is. Especially if the person is like just blatantly, blatantly prejudiced. But here's the thing: just because someone is prejudiced doesn't mean what they're saying is false. And since no one can do nuance nowadays, it's like people can't separate how they feel about someone from the the merits of what they're saying. You can completely dislike someone and dislike the things that they stand for while acknowledging what they said was reasonable. So, so that's where we're gonna go, and I'm gonna start this from today. Right, it's the perfect segue. Is that I literally had an argument back and forth on Facebook today with someone who's seemingly a friend of mine, but this person has been calling me a sellout and a racist for the past 10 years because he's on some Hotep bullshit. For people who are unfamiliar with Hotep, so there's these people only exist online, by the way. These are a bunch of black people who do literally say Hotep this and Hotep that online. But they are the conscious woke black people. Uh just to let you folks know who aren't black, woke the term woke started in the black community back in the 90s. Like this is not it was co-opted by white people in the 2010s, but conscious and woke this started literally in the black community back in the 90s. What's his name? The guy who made the show ATL. He literally made a song on that. What's his name? I can't remember. Someone might remember his name. Stay woke. That song, that maybe I should play it, but I'm not trying to get copyrighted. That last live stream I did about hip hop music sucking now, man, that got flagged. Donald Glover, thank you, Childish Gambino. And that song is, by the way, I love that song, even though I disagree with the message about stay woke. And so the original meaning behind stay woke meant be aware of racial injustice and police brutality. Hey Agatha, I'm glad you're here. I need because I'm gonna need you to help moderate if things get a little out of control. You know how it is, just the normal rigmarole. Plus, like I said, um, I needed someone of the tribe to help me with this uh, conversation because you know the other folks don't always miss the sometimes the other folks don't always get the points that I'm making, and they sometimes like misdirect the conversation into something else, and I want to keep it focused on black fatigue. I don't want it being talked. I don't want us leading into some other random conversation outside of this. So, but in any case, Dad, I can't find his song. I'm seeing literally every one of his other big songs other than Stay Woke. I see Redbone and Feels Like Summer. That was my joint years ago. Um, was it in Redbone? Because I keep seeing a bunch of I don't know. He said Carlton stay yeah, so Carlton says Stay Woke is not mainstream. This. Oh, this is part of Redbone. All right, enough of that. Not trying to copyright it. So anyway, um, so again, black fatigue has been around. Now, if I don't know if this is correct or not, but my other moderators said that that Richard Pryor was talking about black fatigue way back in one of his comedy albums from the 70s, which may be true. Again, this is not a new phenomenon amongst black people. What happens is a lot of them feel socially embarrassed or butthurt when it leaves the community. So when it becomes a conversation outside of the community, all of a sudden it's racist to bring these things up, right? Agus says, hello, everyone. As you come in, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks. Please and thank you. Since I think you're the only moderator here right now, Agatha, I think Moonlit or went live on his own channel. Can you do me a favor and put my Cash App handle in the chat room. It is $ Just A Contrarian, all one word. $ Just A Contrarian. Now pin it to the chat room. Carter says black people have been talking about black fatigue since the Jim Crow era. Yeah, like I'm saying, this is not a new conversation. Like I said from the '90s, but that's because like that's the earliest I would have heard about it because the '80s I was a child in the '70s. I wasn't even around. So, well, except for the late '70s when I would have been literally an infant. So, what's up, Nathan? So, so that's the thing. So I'm gonna actually go to the argument that my friend and I had on Facebook. Because like I said, it makes a perfect part of this conversation here. And by the way, this was not intentional. What happened was I reposted a status update from Dennis Sperling, the black lawyer and black man's advocate. Um, Thank you, Agatha. She's sweet, guys. Um, but yeah, hold on. Let me go to this conversation. So, like I said, this guy has literally been calling me a sellout and a racist for the past 10 years. And it all started because he posted something about Erica Badu. And I was just like, yo, she's not a role model. Now, mind you, I didn't mind coming to his page and commenting on things because one, he has well, he's a musician or was a musician, and he teaches music, and so he has a large fan base. But we know each other personally from school. So I came out, I was like, dog, I was like, Erica Badu isn't really a role model. I was like, you know, I said she's with a lot of thottiness. And so he's basically calling me out saying, you just a sellout. That's why you don't like her, this and that. And I was like, there's nothing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with liking her, but she's not a role model. So he tried to play me cheap on his channel because he's pandering to his little his little fan base. Most of them who are a bunch of these little black feminist bitches. So excuse my language. I'm trying to not curse anymore. Um, I think what I'm gonna start doing to keep myself from cursing, I'm gonna have to start adding up. I'm gonna have to do 10 push-ups every time I curse. But I don't know, that might end up being a lot of push-ups. um, you guys can tell me if you think I should do push-ups every time I curse or whether I should just keep on cursing. That's up to you guys. Um, but yeah, so like I said, this started almost 10 years ago because he was calling me out saying I was a sellout because I was dissing Erica Badu. I was like, but she is a hoe. Like if you look at Erica Badu's career, she's a thought. Carl says do the push-ups. All right. Anyone else agree with Carlton? Should I do push-ups every time I curse? Now I'm not saying if I roast somebody, just if I curse. I can still roast people. I'm just not gonna curse. And I'm not gonna use the F word because that gets me flat. Because that'll get me demonetized when I use that F word. Apparently it's all right to use the R word now, but I can't use the F word. And I being Gen X, I'm used to using both of those words. So what's up, Drizzy Dre? You've been here before, brother, I believe. He said, Roast, you are a broke Carlton hitting rock bottom. All right. Well, I'm not roasting today, brother. I want to go into my conversation. He said, Erica has an Andrea 3000 baby too. Yeah, she has a lot of people's babies. And then remember, she got the BBL, and then she and her daughter on stage twerking. I'm like, yo, and that's just look. I can't. I was looking at it from the point. Look, even if I'm not dating black chicks anymore, I still see them largely as my sisters and aunties. So when they do stuff, I'm still gonna be like, yo, that's not cool. Even if it's not because I'm sexually invested in them myself. I'm, you know, I still, I still want them to put forth a positive image of themselves. But anyway, so he called me out on it, and then I showed this to one of my friends. He's been on my channel before as well, by the way. Like the guy who I'm always driving with, I showed it to him. Now, he doesn't show his face on my channel because he actually has a professional job, unlike my friend who was trying to call me a racist today and for the past 10 years online. Um, but something in my eye, guys. I think I got a um, eyelash in my eye. Anywho, if this guys, if this guy's been a troll, he can go. Alex says I do not like all the BBLs. My sister don't. Your sister got a BBL? Oh, why? I, here's the thing. No guys like. So I thought it was just me. So when I first started seeing BBLs like 12 years ago, I was like, this shit looks ridiculous. But I thought most guys liked it because I was like, why else are women doing it unless they like it? I assume guys like the BBLs, they like the lashes. Then I heard from other brothers, they was like, man, we don't like this shit either. None of us do. I'm like, oh, word? So why are they doing it? He was like, I don't know. Then we found out the girls are basically just doing it to compete with each other. Sort of like guys like hitting the gym when they want to hit a new PR and stuff like that. Like that's not impressive to women. It's just impressive to each other. So they're doing the same things, but what they're doing is a much more extreme body modification, which is actually getting elective surgery. You know, and by the way, I've heard the BBL smell like trash. I'll put it that way. I'm trying not to curse, guys. Call me out when I'm cursing, so I can do my push-ups. I already owe you. I already owe you 10. All right, I already owe you 10. Um, hold on, I'm missing any messages. Oh, make sure. Oh, matter of fact, let me check. Let's change my chat filter to all messages here. Uh, Agus says I enjoyed the rant. um, he said I'll do push-ups every time you curse. I'll be buffed as hell. Dang, am I that bad? By the way, that doesn't count. If I'm quoting someone else, that doesn't count as me cursing. And I'm not trying to finagle it. It is a thing in philosophy and in linguistics where we have a distinction between use use of a term and like using a term and actually uh like expressing it or whatever, like the use versus, I forgot, what do you call it, use versus, like basically if you are quoting something else, that's not you doing it, right? As opposed to you using it for yourself. But anyway, so if I'm quoting someone else, that doesn't count. Although I will still, if it's a bad word, uh I will still try to self edit. But if I'm quoting someone else, generally that's not going to count towards my push-ups, even if I do still say it. But I will try to self edit. Most says I'm with Carlton. I'll do 10 push-ups for bad cussing, 5 for lightly cussing. Alex is not my sister, my black sister. BBLs are part of black fatigue too. Yeah, I'm getting into that. It's part of 304 culture, a whole culture, which is what led me, like I said, into this first disagreement with my friend. Whom, by the way, if he ever sees this live stream, he's more than invited to come debate me on my live stream, or I can go on his. Although I think he does his like early in the freaking morning, like 5 o'clock in the morning or something. Like I'm not. Yeah, I'm not getting up. I get up there early, but that's the exercise. I'm not getting up for any other purpose that early unless it's the exercise. I'm definitely not getting up there to talk with someone on their streaming on their live stream. So I know he likes to do a live stream like 5 in the morning or some crap. Ain't no way in the world, man. So we pull up these comments here. And so, like I said, my friend who normally I drive around with and I do those videos for you guys, he he came into the he came into the comment thread and was like, "How you gonna call him a sellout for pointing out something that you or no one else will want their daughter to emulate?" He's like, "None of y'all will want your daughter to emulate what Erica Badu's life." He's like he's like we'll be all up in arms if that was something happening to one of our loved ones, but you're gonna sit there and like glorify it because it's Erica Badu, and then call someone out when they're just bringing up the point that that's that's not a way to live. And so he didn't have anything to say about that. He was just he fell back and was like, oh well, yeah, but I didn't see Erica Badu as being that bad or whatever. So that was his little mea culpa because someone else called him out on it who is pro black. um, it says red comments or lyrics or quotes don't count. Yeah, he said we cuss, we get fit. I guess I know I was referring to my race of black sisters, not my biological sister. Sorry for the mix up. Oh, okay, okay, got it. So that's where it started, and then like because of that, I'm gonna admit I felt some sort of way. I got salty, and I would come on to his other into his other posts, and whenever he said something I disagree with it, I would say so. So that's how it started this back and forth between us. But like but at least about 2 or 3 years ago, you know, we got into a little uh, heated um, dispute on one of his posts. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna fall back. It's not worth getting into arguments with him like that. This was about 2, 3 years ago. I was like, so I'm not gonna like keep insulting this man on his page. I was like, that's not cool. He said, I was like, I'm being petty. Cause I even told him, I was like, the reason he's like, you always got something negative to say on on my page. I was like, yeah, because ever since you called me like a sellout and an Uncle Tom and all that sort of stuff from years ago about the Erica Badu thing, I was like, yeah, I felt some sort of way about that. So, I let it go since then. Like I would comment on his threat on his post afterwards, but it was never anything negative. It like if I didn't agree with something he said, I just left it alone, or I would put something on my page, um, on, on my account, right? But I would never attack him on his anymore. I guess as I enjoyed a guy conversation with you in the car. Thanks. Hopefully he's watching this or he will watch this later. Um, but yeah, so it's been 2 years since we've 2 or 3 years since we've had any beef about politics or race or racial issue racial justice issues or whatever. Um, so you know I thought everything was cool whatever. Then he came onto my thing. Now I'm gonna quote what Dennis Sperling has said on his. This is on his social media. He had this both up on his on his YouTube post, on his Instagram, and on his Facebook. And he's had several of these status updates all talking about black fatigue. The one that I reposted on my page was when he said this: if you are loud and rude in public, You're the reason for black fatigue. If you are making disparaging remarks about people when you can't have your way, you are black fatigue. If you ever said quote unquote the fuck, you are black fatigue. Again, I was quoting someone, so that doesn't count. Again, that's the difference between mentioning and using. I was mentioning something, I wasn't using it. So no push-ups for me. See that? Uh, See that, bro? They say you're a cool dude. I don't want to say his name on here. Like I said, he actually has a professional job, unlike the guy who was criticizing me, which is my other problem. So the guy, let's just call him a guy in the car, right? So I told him about this earlier today and showed him, and he even said, this musician, your musician friend of yours, has a lot of audacity for someone who doesn't have that much, you know, that much merit going on. And he can say that because the guy in the car is very accomplished. And he came a long, in the 12 years I've known him, he's came a long way. A pause. But he's come far from where I've known him 12 years ago to where he is now. And he has every right to state that, right? Um uh Whereas my friend who is, or my alleged friend, I should say, he's my age, and cool, he's a musician or music teacher, whatever. But you, he has no more, um, he has no more credentials for him to uh, criticize me, than pretty much anyone else does, right? Like, if he wants to disagree with me, that's cool. But sitting there calling me racist and this and that, like, really? And again, the what I just quoted from Dennis Sperling isn't even outrageous, right? Like, again, I'm gonna restate what Dennis Sperling said, and like I said, he's had numerous status updates about this over the past few days. And as he said, what we're calling black fatigue is really ghetto fatigue. Black people can do nuance, where maybe some non-black racists will assume all of us fall under this. We black people ourselves know that if it doesn't apply, it doesn't. If it doesn't apply, let it fly. Like, some of us know that we don't fall into this camp. The whole tribe does not fall within this certain camp, but a lot of us do, and we've been calling it out for decades. And so, like Dennis Brown said, if you're loud and rude in public, you're the reason for black fatigue. If you are making disparaging remarks about people when you can't have your way, you are black fatigue. If you have ever said, quote unquote, the F, you are black fatigue, right? So this is what he's talking about. And he gave other examples on his page with his numerous status updates, right? That wasn't a controversial thing because black people have complained about this themselves all the time. Not just myself, and it's been pro black people who talked about this. It has been pro black people who have moved away from other black people because of these sorts of problems, being loud and obnoxious, um, having violent tendencies, um, doing things, doing the sorts of things that will lower a person's property value. These sorts of things, right? But apparently, the only thing the musician friend uh, knew about black fatigue is probably what he saw a white woman talking about on TikTok. So he's feeling butthurt that another black person would bring this up, as if, okay, if we bring it up, then we're trying to appease white people, right? So I'm gonna go into these comments. Melissa says black fatigue was being talked about by Richard Gere. I mean, excuse me, by Richard Pryor since the 70s is a real thing. You can say similar with Native Americans, whites, Asians, etc., but we're all in each different ways. Yeah, but I'm keeping this on black people today. I'm not trying to generalize this to everyone else. I'm keeping this strictly here. I don't want to I don't want the conversation steering into something else about other people. That can be another day. I want to keep it. I'm gonna keep it focused. That way, we can get through it. He said, "Now, bro, man, from the car, like bro, man, from the fifth floor." I guess it's so true. He said no racism here. Like, oh, I didn't even see what they posted. So yeah, and then that was the other. So my other friend Marcus, who you guys know, for people who don't know, Marcus was the original guy who told me I should start making being a content creator. He told me this like 5 years ago, and I didn't start until 3 years ago because I didn't really believe that I could pull that off. And so like 3 years ago, I just dipped my toes into the water and just kept treading on from there. So here we are. Mark, so he told me earlier today, he was like, "Yo, how's the dude gonna call you racist?" Mind you, we all went to school. We all went to the same university around the same time, right? Um, but he was like, "How's dude gonna call you racist?" He said if he ever saw your live streams, he would have saw that you call people out for racism all the time. I'm like, I know. I was like, but he's butthurt. So anytime I disagree with him, it's all about racism. So the very first comment on this reposted status update from Dennis Sperling is is this guy saying only racists suffer from black fatigue, and that's just again that's patently false because black people have been talking about black fatigue before white people ever have. Black white people have started talking about black fatigue because of them hearing it from other black people. Not it didn't come from white people and trickle down to the black community. It went the other way around, just like being woke did. Woke started in the black community and then made it into the mainstream and made it into mainstream society. Same thing with black fatigue. Black fatigue started in the black community and is now trickling down into the mainstream community. There was a book written like it wasn't called Black Fatigue decades and decades ago, but the term has been used at least for the past 5 years. Like there was a book called on the Black Fatigue published 5 years ago, right? Aga says, yes, I don't like being around loud and obnoxious people. I find in my generation they are very rude. Carlton says, extreme tiredness resulting from mental or physical exertion or illness defines fatigue. One says Matt Rife, a comedian, he wrote some black dude who said illegal immigrants are stealing black jobs. Matt said, like, what, being loud and obnoxious on trains. He said, yes, white Americans learned through FBA, black communities made Americans aware. Black Carter says, I think the BLM, big, large mansions, I mean, sorry, um, Black Lives Matter also added to the black fatigue in a major way. Yes, they did, because you had a bunch of you had a bunch of black lesbians uh, using police brutality as a way to make money and buy big, large mansions for themselves. That is a part of black fatigue. A bunch of people who claim to be social justice warriors and uh, racial just racial injustice activists who basically just make a career out of this shit. Damn. All right. Damn. All right. That's 40 push-ups, right? Does it count if I say it in another language? Yes or no? Give me a vote. Does it count if I cuss in another language? I guess this is I think you're honest and people get offended for the truth you speak. So yeah, so again, so his first comment on my thread, Moses highly agree with Agatha just said. Honestly, it's never brutal. Um, damn, it's not a swear though. Okay, but I did say shit, so I owe that. So that's 20. Um, so the thread starts right there, and he's like, only racists suffer from black fatigue, and he's literally addressing that to me, right? So, all right, let me get my glasses out. Word on the street is Agatha doesn't need a BBL. I'm just saying. Anyway, um, that's word on the street. But get monitor here. So I said I'm not using his name again, but he's a let's just say he's a local DC musician, and he once had a hit song in DC said read a book. That's as much as I'll reveal about him. Yeah, Melissa is only racist stuff from Black Fatigue. That's dumb as all get out. That's literally what he said. And again, how? Yeah. Anyway, so I said, then I am happily quote unquote racist because I can't stand ninjas, and this isn't new. I went on to say Chris Rock has been talking about this since 1996, and it's the reason that everyone moves away from Baltimore and other ghetto cities as soon as they get money. So he replies, "Yeah, I've known you were racist." Mind you, when I said racist, I put it in scare quotes, meaning that I didn't really mean it. I'm I'm just mocking what he said. He completely missed the subtlety of that sarcasm. When people put something in scare quotes, they're being sarcastic, or they're showing that they don't genuinely hold that term's reference. But anyway, so he responds, and then so he says, "I've known you were racist." Then he says, "You, your hate for black people, especially black women, has always been obvious. You know this." So I respond, "Yeah, because unless I avow degeneracy, I'm a quote unquote racist. I don't give a f racial policing by you Umar sexuals. For you people who don't know what Umar sexual is, this is these pro blackity black people who dick police other black men and make and shame them if they date anything other than black women. And he's one of those folks. Um, and then I went on to also say, yeah, because I don't want my future daughter to be a whore like Erica Badu nor Sexy Red. Um, then I said, FYI, shaming tactics don't work on me. That's some female shit. I've I'm moved only by reason and evidence. I do I do hate some folks. So what? What's up, Pound Lover? He says, calling people racist is what people say when they have nothing else and can't handle debate. Bro, that's literally what I said in this thread. What? Yo, wait for it, please. I definitely went there and said that too, because we all realize that, like at this point, the term racism is losing its meaning because it's used so much as Peter crying wolf at this point. It's just Peter crying wolf. And if you're a millennial or Gen Z, you may not get that reference. Um, but it means when someone keeps doing something over and over again, um, when it's not when it's not a real emergency, people stop believing that it has any urgency to it, right? So anyway, so he goes on to say this, and only coons work hard to make white people comfortable. Again, where did any of this come from? So again, this wasn't from Dennis Sperling's status update itself. He's personally attacking me from the back and forth we had over the past 10 years, ever since I said that Erica Badu is a hoe and not a role model. So ever since we went back and forth 10 years ago on that when I said that Erica Badu is a hoe, you know, we've had this 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 dispute. Actually, it probably wasn't 10 years ago. It's probably more like 9 years ago. Close enough. 9, 10 years. It's a long time to be insinuating someone's a racist without just because you dislike their opinions, right? So, um, make sure make sure I get all comments. I might have missed some here. Mm. So again, he then comments again, and only coons work hard to make white people comfortable. Again, you don't get any of that from the previous conversation, nor from the status update itself, talking about loud and rude people. Who wants to be around loud and rude people, regardless of what race they are? How is it trying to make white people comfortable if you don't want to be around loud and rude people? Who whom does, right? So I responded to this further further reply, by saying, well, black people have more black fatigue than anyone else because we have to suffer these idiots, meaning we like because these people are in our community, we deal with them more than anyone else from any other community. So we have the most black fatigue, right? That's my point. Um, and so he says, well, so the musician friend says, self-hating black people have black fatigue. They want to demonstrate to white people they aren't one of us. They treasure the pats on the head. What? Agnes says, I think most black women are well shaped. No need for doing BBL. I think it's disgusting. Well, yeah. So the funny thing is, a lot of black women are overweight, so they don't even need a BBL. They need Ozempic. No, actually, I'm joking. I don't recommend Ozempic to most folks. I think people should just exercise and use um, diet and use reduced uh, caloric um, intake. I don't advocate for Ozempic or that other medicine on just being used. But yeah, and BBLs are dangerous and they stink. Like I found out there's actually a stink that comes from BBL. We can talk about that another day. Anywho, Melissa says most women outside the USA are well shaped and healthier. Facts. Hello says I have ALC, Ilhan Omar, and Jasmine Crockett fatigue. Has nothing to do with color. It has to do with what comes out of their mouths. Yeah. Uh, Carter says facts. So yeah, so he says self-hating black people have black fatigue. They want to demonstrate to white people they aren't one of us. They treasure the pats on their head. And yeah, okay. So I further responded to this quip, and I said they didn't move. I said they didn't move away from violent niggas to appease white people. That's some tortured ass reasoning just to maintain a debunked narrative. By the way, ass does not count as a curse word here. If it's been in the Bible, I can say it. Because they've used the word ass in the Bible both to describe a donkey and also to describe how someone was acting, even way back then. So if it's good enough for the Bible, it's good enough for here. Anyway, um, So he says, well, you didn't post about violence fatigue. You posted about black fatigue. Only racists conflate violence with black people. You are an avowed racist, blindly spewing racist talking points. Am I the? Am I, guys? You can call me a lot of things. You can call me misogynist. Um, you can call me arrogant. You can call me a know-it-all. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you can even call me a moron, but an avowed. But how am I? But calling me but calling me, mind you, he's calling me racist against my own race, not racist against other racial groups. He's saying I'm racist against my own racial background, right? Sure, okay. Um, so this is when I get into a very sardonic tone here. And by the way, he completely misses the bitter sarcasm that I'm using here, which is sardonic stands for bitter sarcasm, right? So that's what I'm referring to when I say sardonic humor. But he misses this completely. I'm a very sarcastic, sardonic person, which is why Raphael has always been my favorite Ninja Turtle because he's a sarcastic jerk. So I respond back to my musician friend, "Yep, I sure am. I'll gladly be called one if that means rejecting the degeneracy of the communita." I said, "Your sign language doesn't work on me. That's shame's insult, guilt, and a need to be right. Sign language. Your sign language doesn't work on me. I catch flights, not feelings." Hashtag SYSBM. Save yourself, black man. And I doubled down on it. I said, keep trying that fallacious tactic. Maybe it will one day work. Maybe. I said, meanwhile, on the other side of Gotham City, this I said the person's status update that I reposted is Dennis Sperling, who is a successful black lawyer who's received all of his college degrees from HBCUs, historically black colleges and in universities. Unlike you, because he went to the same white institution that I went to, the University of Maryland. I say he advocates specifically for black men, sometimes to a fault, like Diddy when he was on Diddy's side last year until, well, but and I went on. I said, moreover, black fatigue is being talked about within the black manosphere amongst mostly black men, not amongst white people. I said you should pity your. Well, oh, sorry. So he went on to say I should pity myself in another comment, which I should have said. So because he said, yeah, I pity you. You'll never separate yourself from blackness enough to be truly accepted by the white people you love. Which what? Again, I have like 5 or 6 white people on my personal Facebook page, and I have literally like 1,600 Facebook friends on that page, and only I can say only about 6 of them are actually white. And out of those 6 folks, it's only one of them that I'm in constant contact with because he and I are really tight, and hopefully he and I will get together so we can hang out since we haven't seen each other since college, and he might run for office. He actually wants me to help him out with that at one point, maybe. But getting ahead of myself here. Other than that, who there's no white people I'm trying to be accepted by. Like he he's one of these idiotic black people that can't fathom that anyone has a different opinion than the black consensus that he grew up that he's around because not all black people think like him. There's no homogenous view amongst the black community on these sorts of topics. But pro blackity black pan Africanist woke conscious hotep motherfuckers like him think that everything that they say speaks for all black people, and anyone who doesn't agree with them aren't truly black people of whatever. Anywho, so he says, I pity you. So again, I said, keep trying that fallacious tactic. Maybe it'll one day work for you. Maybe. I said, meanwhile, on the other side of Gotham, the person status update that I reposted, Dennis Sperling, who is a successful black lawyer who rejected all, I mean, excuse me, who received all his degrees from historically black colleges and universities, unlike you, he advocates specifically for black men. Moreover, black fatigue is being talked about within the black manosphere amongst mostly black men, not amongst white people. Most white people aren't even concerned about this thing. The majority of white people in the country don't even live near black people to have black fatigue, other than what they see on TV and in the news, right? So I told him, I said, you should pity yourself for your lack of critical thinking skills and catering to a black misandrist. Misandrist means man hating. Black misandrist, dashiki wearing bohemian sycophants, talking all this pro black nonsense that's been rejected by prominent civil rights leaders since the 1960s. And I'm not joking. People like Martin Luther King and others rejected the Black Power movement of the 1960s because they considered it divisive and thought that the things they were fighting for in the weren't in the long-term interests of the black community. And Martin Luther King and those folks were right, because after he died and Malcolm died and all these other folks, passed away, Medgar Evers, the Black Power movement became became strong in the 70s. Black Power movement, Black Liberation movement, whatever you want to call it, and it's been around since then and has made no gains since it's been around. Like I said, it's been around since the 60s. It took it it really really germinated in the 70s after the real civil rights leaders died. And it hasn't accomplished anything. If an ideologies are judged by their real world results. If you have 50 to 60 years to test your ideology and it bears no fruit, your ideology is without merit, which is why communism doesn't work. It's been around since the 50s and it's borne no fruit. Every communist country has either become a failed state or has adopted a market economy. Evidence matters, guys. In the light of evidence, to quote to quote W.V.O. Quine, Willard Van Orman Quine, one of the greatest analytic philosophers there ever was. You know, in the light of evidence, any any claim can be, changed or modified or rejected. The evidence has shown that communism didn't work. The evidence has shown that the Black Power movement hasn't worked. Um, so then I said, so then I tagged my my friend in the car and said, I said, yeah, he says this, I'm appealing to the white people that I love. How pathetic. I said, this is why I travel abroad, to get away from these plantation bros. Plantation bros is a term within the passport bro movement that refers to the black people who deride the black men who travel abroad for better women and for better experiences, because they say what else could be better here than what Massa gave us? What you need to go overseas for? We got all these beautiful black women over here. What you got a pound with these 300-pound women? You can't be a stepdaddy. You can't be a stepdaddy. Huh? What made you think you can't be no stepdaddy? Huh? Why you rejecting Massa? Why Massa made good over here for us? That's plantation bros. and these are the niggas we trying to get away from. So that's what people misunderstand about the passport bro movement. It's not just all about finding women and getting coochie. It's also about getting away from people here, and people miss that. This is why you shouldn't listen to uh, documentaries talking about passport bros and it's a bunch of white people because they're not the passport bros. They're just a bunch of sex pats. The real passport bros have always been mostly black men, and they've always traveled not just for better women, but for better experiences to get away from the ghetto, to get away from the lack of opportunities, to go to places where they feel safer. Literally, every time you'll talk to a passport bro, who's not well traveling to Colombia, that is, um, and if they're traveling to Colombia, I get it. The women are beautiful. A, a, a Colombian four is a 10 here in America. I'm just gonna say that. So, anywho, um, so I get why they travel there, even though it's dangerous. But outside of Latin America, generally when black people travel anywhere like Europe and Asia and Africa, they always say, "Well, I have peace of mind here. I feel safer here. When I see cops, I know they're not after me. Like when I see black people here, I know that they have the same mindset as me. They're not on some dumb stuff, right?" Moonless, Aga says, Moonlit, remember we want to keep the conversation on local black Americans. Yeah, please. However, says, I don't understand how they got elected. That's a whole different subject. By the way, we can change the subject if someone drops a super chat, or they can hit this Cash App in the handle right here. Um, if like if you want to support me, the Cash App is here, and the link is here in the chat room, or you can send me a super chat right here on the live stream. Whenever guys, whenever you send a super chat, it will light up right here and show everyone your contribution and your comment or question. Okay. Um, Also, you can do super. Besides the super chat, you can do a super sticker. Super sticker is the same thing. It's going to be plastered on the chat room for everyone to see, or you can drop me one of the gems. That's also the gems are sort of like the super sticker, but they're animated, so they're like animated gifs. Love says that's very racist. What's next? The tired Uncle Tom comment. He said the problem with continuing to make everything about race is that when it really does happen, no one will pay attention. Complete facts, however, and that's what I meant when I said Peter crying wolf. People, that's a part of black fatigue itself, is black people calling everything racist when they can't get their way. And it's like once you start abusing the term where it no longer has any import, then people aren't going to take it seriously when it really is a case of racism. Like when there really is a case of racism, people aren't going to take it seriously because they're so tired of hearing black people who don't want to be accountable for their behavior use the term. Like, and I'm not joking. Some of you don't think I'm joking, but there are literally now fat black women. Again, this is not all black women, just morbidly or severely obese black women who are now saying that the reason that they are fat is because of racism, that the fact that they can't lose weight like white and Asian people is due to systemic racism, not because they can't, not because they don't exercise. I'm like, trick, please. Like, come on. You ate too many pork chops. You haven't ran since probably high school, if then, and you're gonna like, come on. So yeah, this is why people don't take the term racism seriously anymore. When you literally have people claiming that their morbid obesity is due to racism, it's like, all right, come on. And no, and however, he did call me Uncle Tom a long time ago. Like I said, we've been going back and forth for the past 10 years online. Um, Ever since I called Erica Badu a hoe, because she is. She she glorifies 304 culture. 304 is hoe spelled backwards because that's how you would spell things on a calculator. Like remember for us who used to use, the Texas Instrument calculators, whether it's the scientific calculator or the graphing calculator, um, and you would spell stuff out, or on those old or on the old cell phones, like spelling stuff out like hoe and love and stuff like that, and you spell it 304, and you just turn it around and it says hoe. So they call this 304 culture. She's one of the earliest people who started this 304 culture that's now glorified in black entertainment. Tell You'll be hard pressed to go on Instagram and not see someone twerking now, and it would have nothing to do with like sex. It could be the most benign thing. They're just twerking for no effing reason, right? I guess there's lots of women in my Gen Z age are in my Gen Z my age are not fat and healthy. However, says he sounds like he's spewing leftist talking points to me. I don't want like either side, by the way. No, that's fair. And so here he tries to be disingenuous, guys. So he says, "Oh, by the way, what's up, Jr. Jr. the boss." So by the way, this is where he gets disingenuous, guys. He says, "What fallacious tactic? How am I trying to trick you? You hate black people. You post about it often. I see the posts, point them out. You agree that you're racist, which, by the way, I didn't. The black man's the black mason here is just black men who want to be white. It all tracks. First of all, Dennis Sperling did not say he was a Freemason. If he is, kudos to him. He's actually an Alpha Phi Alpha Incorporated, and he's a black lawyer. I don't get the whole Mason anyway. Uh, so he's being disingenuous here, guys. Mr. D says, however, don't ever side with the left. And Helen says, what does it matter? It's a demonic tool of division. This is why I choose no political party, because I don't think you can think critically about political topics if you are partisan. This is why uh, I'm politically agnostic. Um, Carlton says he has the Umar gene. Oh, he definitely does. And for the longest part, another reason why I would not criticize him anymore on posts that I disagree with him on, one is because, like I said, about 3 years ago, after we had that little heated debate on his page, I was like, this is being unproductive. Us just going back and forth on his page every time I disagree with him. I said because now he sees it as me just coming online to personally attack him, and I was like, that's not what I want to do. I was like, I did want to get across the point that he started it first when he started calling me a coon and a sellout because I called Erica Badu a hoe, which she is. Like, I'm just describing her behavior. So, and if people don't understand what I'm talking about, go look up Erica Badu's love history, and you'll quickly see what I'm talking about, and you'll see how she, was literally flaunting her butt on stage with her daughter, both of them like twerking. I'm like, what? Why are you doing this? But back to the subject. Hanlo says, Mr. D, I definitely do not. I'm probably more of a libertarian. Hanlo says, Sperling learned how to think, not what to think. Right. Trey says, what's up, brother? What's up, Trey? He said, we're also saying Marxism doesn't work. Yeah, when I say communism, I'm I'm really talking about the Marxist Leninist ideology, because communism has never been achieved. Communism is actually supposed to be the end state, that like the end goal of socialism, or the 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 Leninist Marxist model. The end stage was supposed to be communism, but again, no socialist country has ever achieved communism because it is a utopian ideal. By definition, utopian ideals can't ever be reached. You can, I guess, get close to them, and the more a country strives to get closer to that goal, usually the more misery it causes to the actual people involved in that nation, which is why those states either become failed states, or authoritarian police states, or they adapt and learn to have a market economy like China. So anywho, um, Carlin says most of us FBAs don't have a passport. Well, I do, and I've advocated. This is why I've advocated on my channel, and many other passports have been telling brothers, dudes, go get your passport. Go see how the rest of the world sees you, because the way the rest of the world sees you is not the way America sees you. It is therapeutic. It is therapeutic for black men to travel because they will have experiences they would never have here. It's therapeutic. And I mean, it literally costs a passport literally costs less than a pair of classic Jordans. So there's really no excuse that people couldn't get it unless, they have back child support. But like, even if you are on parole and probation, you can still get a passport. Some, like, because some people will try some of these sisters will, these disingenuous sisters, not all sisters, but some of these black women out here who are disingenuous will tell you, oh, you guys with your criminal backgrounds, you ain't gonna be able to get a passport. You can get a passport. There's literally only look, outside of owing back child support, there are only two reasons outside of a court. Now, if a court mandates that you can't receive a passport, that's a different thing. But there are only two criminal convictions that keep someone from a passport. That is international narcotics trafficking and treason. That's it. Otherwise, no one has an excuse, because again, than it costs less than Jordans. Like, I'm sure someone can ruffle together $130. But yeah, you gotta do is go to your local post office. And I think they also do it at, like, you can get the applications at Walgreens or CVS as well. Carlton says Pookie and Ray Ray can't get a passport because of their criminal record. Well, that actually, yeah, like I said, that's not true. They can get one. Like I said, the only thing stopping someone from getting one is outside of it, a outside of the court saying they can't have one, because for some people they might actually, because of the nature of things they've done, the court may say that they can't, that they're no longer eligible for passports. But outside of that, again, there's only two criminal convictions that keep people from a passport: international narcotic trafficking, which, if you are convicted of that, you, you are on some Breaking Bad type stuff. um, or treason. Again, if you, yeah, don't 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 do treason. Don't do espionage for another country. I'm just saying, it ain't worth it. Be patriotic. um, um, Carlton says, I saw that narrative too, that obese black women can't lose weight because of racism. Shaking my head. Yeah, that's just BS, man. But yeah, okay. So again, I tell him, so I respond to him, to his being disingenuous, saying he wasn't using any fallacious tactics. I was like, your fallacious reasoning or tactics were straw man claims. A straw man claim, guys, is when um someone asserts that you made a claim that you actually didn't. Like, or they twist what you're saying. Like, if you say, um, man, I really love Jordans, and then that person goes on to say, well, he says he loves anything from Nike. That's not what I said. I said I love Jordans. I didn't say I love everything from Nike. I might find everything else that Nike makes trash, but I love Jordans, which, by the way, isn't true. I'm just using that as an example of a straw man claim. And by the way, if you guys want to know more about fallacious claims, I've done like 4 whole live streams talking about fallacious reasoning. So you can check those out on my channel. You can do a little short dig through the search, look up fallacies or fallacious reasoning, and it'll pull up like 4 or 5 streams that I've done just on fallacious reasoning itself. So if you want to be more adept at that sort of stuff when people use bad reasoning, okay. So yeah, then I said you're begging the question. Begging the question is when you assert a claim that you ought to be proving, right? Assuming that is one of the most, and again, that's one of the most common fallacies there are is assuming what you ought to be proving. So much so that it goes by like 5 or 10 different names. The Latin name is petitio principi. It's also called special pleading. It's also called circular argument. You get the gist. Then I said you're making ad hominem attacks. Ad hominem means ad hominem in Latin literally means to the person, which means it's a personal attack on someone. Instead of attacking the person's claims or argument, you're attacking that person, which has nothing to do with whether their claims are true or false. Which is so these are the things he was doing, and I left out some of the smaller fallacies because I just didn't want to have a I didn't want a litany of of fallacies like I'm doing like a logic an informal logic class here. But it's like, yeah, you're making straw man claims against me. You're begging the question, and you're lobbing ad hominem attacks at me, etc. And I was like, by the way, go ahead and attack Mr. Sperling Esquire. And after this, and because I mentioned this, I actually made my I actually made that my I actually made my post public just for the hopes that Dennis Sperling might see this, so he will comment on it himself because he is notorious for roasting people. If anyone has ever seen his content, he is notorious for roasting people and doxing them. So, anywho, so I said, yeah. By the way, go ahead and attack Mr. Sperling Esquire. He's done more for young and older black men than just rap for them like you. Because again, my musician friend calls himself not a rapper, but that's literally what he became quasi famous within the DC area for, as being a rapper, especially when he blew up with the song Read a Book. And again, if you know who that is, cool, but I'm not going to mention his name. Um, I'll say Mr. Sperling speaks up for the upwardly mobile black folks who don't want to be tied to Pookie and Ray Ray. I said further, he rejects the dick policing of con artists like Dr. Umar and the other Hotep morons. I was like, but you rarely care to research anything before you jump out there with absurd claims, just like you did prior with Kevin Samuels. He and I had a back and forth about that with Kevin Samuels, because again, he panders to a bunch of stupid black women who were all up in arms about Kevin Samuels, even though Kevin Samuels' whole thing was trying to put together black relationships. But in doing so, he was telling these black women, y'all need to start accepting average men. But all these average women think they deserve above average men. And it's like that, no, no, you don't. You're average at best. Why do you think you're gonna get some Fortune 500 guy? And it's like if the Fortune 500 guy does get with you, he's getting with you and many other people as well because he has options. Anywho, I don't need to defend Kevin here. He done well on that himself when he was alive. And Dennis Sperling, O'Shea Duke Jackson, Media Tutorial Reviews, and Lead Attorney have all defended him um, since. He doesn't need my defense. So I said, nevertheless, I never genuinely agree with you that I am racist. You don't get sarcasm, like I mentioned before. I was like, I was mocking your caricature of me. I don't hate all black people. I hate the degenerate black community, and I hate the lack of accountability in the black community for the degeneracy that has ruined many black men's lives. If your only retort to this is you're racist, then you have no rational argument, right? Um, and so I see he didn't. I guess he got tired of the back and forth, so he didn't say anything else, or he just had nothing else to challenge me with. Because basically, that's the only thing he could say after that. At the end of the day, would have been, "Oh, you're just racist," or "You're trying to appease white people," which it's just dumb. So in that, I also so I put in in that comment thread a book that I was telling people they should read because it talks about black fatigue from long time ago, and it's the book by Thomas Sowell, Black Rednecks, White Liberals. This has been a problem in the black community since the antebellum South era. Basically, all the obnoxious behavior that we are fed up within the black community actually started with southern with white southerners. These were typically people who came from the northern parts of the UK, like parts of Ireland and Scotland and parts of northern England, who brought their obnoxious and violent behavior to the American South. And at the time, there were other white Americans who commented on it and talked about their behavior and often referred to them as crackers and rednecks. This was other white people. And if you didn't know that they were talking about white people, like if you switched that out, you would have thought they were talking about black people today, but they were literally talking about white Southerners. And so many of these white Southerners brisked at how they were being portrayed by mainstream society at that time in the 1800s and reformed. But a lot of the black people in the South, whether they were free black people or slaves, adopted their behavior and mannerisms, and that has become current ghetto behavior. So just as so so the irony is to over 150 years ago, white people had white fatigue of white Southerners, and then when the black people in those in those communities adopted their behavior, now it's the same with black people. Now we have black fatigue of these ratchets. It's ratchet fatigue. It's ghetto fatigue. So that's why I listed that book. And I went on to say, and I didn't. So I made this comment independent of the back and forth I had with my musician friend. I was like, quote unquote, black fatigue is ghetto fatigue, and no one's staying silent on it anymore. F any pro blackity black, Dr. Umar, Pan Africanist, Hotep MFer. When you have black parents, and I'm talking about my personal experience here now. I'm when I the stuff I list off here apply to other people, but this is personal. When the stuff I'm saying here, I said when you have black parents that treated you like shit, when you are robbed at gunpoint by niggas, when your black community makes your life miserable, when you're ashamed simply for liking non-ghetto activities and or using standard English, then come talk. After you smoked your weed and greased your little dreads, because basically as soon as someone gets dreads, now they think they're like freaking I don't they think they're just this conscious woke person when they get their dreads. But anyway, and then lastly, I said everyone is quote unquote if everyone is no, I said so everyone is quote unquote racist if they disagree with you. That's zero accountability. Full stop. And that was it. And I also put a link in that thread about Chris Rock uh, talking about in his comedy special Bring the Pain from 1996, because that was like one of the first times that the whole issue of black fatigue, that there was a issue within the black community amongst um, middle class black people and low class black people when that went mainstream. And so Dennis Berlin also mentioned, I think I'm gonna go to his page and go into some of the further stuff he said. Um, because like I said, he did a bunch of status updates, of which I largely agree. Um, he said the reason we have black fatigue is because there's a lot of people with middle class income that don't have middle class values. Money doesn't give you class. You're still low class trash with cash, and no one wants to be around you, right? And he's right. You have, and I know this personally. I live in the suburbs. I see the most ratchet behavior in the in these suburbs. I live in a suburb where I hear gunshots, where there's pit bulls running around with no leash, where I hear neighbors fussing and cussing. And I'm not joking. Like we, the next door neighbor was outside beating up her boyfriend butt naked in the car lot in the parking lot, butt naked. And I know because one of the other neighbors filmed it because it caught his doorbell camera. It was all in front of his doorbell camera because the bitch body slammed her boyfriend on the man's car, butt naked. Her son came out and was like, Mom, what are you doing? Ratchet. And these are the same people when they first moved in 3 years ago. They were literally sitting on my mother's car and my sister's car smoking weed. As it like, and my sister and brother were pissed. So I come outside, I'm like, guys, can y'all move? And they just look at me, all right. And then they throwing up gang signs or whatever. Like, do you know I will waste every single one of you little pieces of crap? Like, cause so I take out the trash after I ask them, can you guys move? And they trying to size me up or whatever. And then it's been a constant back and forth with these neighbors. Like I'm outside, working out, and the guy's making all these whoa noises, like karate type Bruce Lee sounds or whatever. He was like, yeah, they ain't gonna help you and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, why don't we call the police and let's see, right? Because like Aaron Magruder said a long time ago in the Boondock series, the best way to deal with a nigga moment is just to call the police. See, they can be. Let's see how big and bad they are when they facing the law. And we've called the police. Everyone in this neighborhood has issues with my next door neighbors. Everyone in the neighborhood, everyone, because they also park in people's parking spots without asking them and won't move their cars until you literally call the police. That's black fatigue. Carlton says calling Uncle Tom is a compliment. That guy they called you that ain't really that woke. Exactly. And I don't know if you've been on my videos or live streams before, Carlton, but I've mentioned that. But I was like, people who've never read Uncle Tom's Cabin doesn't know that Uncle Tom wasn't the bad guy. He's the protagonist in the. I was like, if you read Uncle Tom, so the reason Uncle Tom became a slur was in the early 20th centuries because some black people even back then was like, whoa, he was too appeasing to the white people. But mind you, Uncle Tom had a family of his own, and what he did was he was doing what he could in the midst of slavery to keep his family together. That's all he was doing. But guess what? He died in that book because he refused to beat another slave. And he didn't rat one out that escaped. He didn't rat out a runaway slave, and he refused to beat that captured slave when they brought him back when they brought the slave back to the plantation. That's how he died. So Uncle Tom is not a bad thing. Uncle Tom was the guy. Uncle Tom was the guy who wouldn't snitch, and despite the de- the dem- the dehumanization of being a slave, conducted himself in a way to try to keep his family together. How that became a slur, again, I get it. In the early 20th century, people thought he was too much of a yes sir, no sir sort of type guy. I get that. But anyone who claims to be woke and will call someone an Uncle Tom is a joke, because again, Uncle Tom was the protagonist in that book, and he died because he refused to beat another slave who was captured, whom he didn't rat out. Uh, Helen says, I tell a lot of people these people crying racism to go back to their countries of origin and ask them why they sold your ancestors. Oh, that's a whole different subject, but you're not wrong. He said, "Where do you stand on the N word? I have left and blocked YouTube channels for using it. I don't care who says it. It's vile." So, are we? Do you make the distinction between the ER and the ER or the A? Look, I do use it, but I only use it in its original context, which means talking about ignorant people, right? So you've heard me use it, today, and when I've used it today is when in the context of dudes being ratchet. Like I use it in the context of ratchet black people. That's how I distinguish black people from um. That's how I distinguish black people who embrace middle class values from the low class ones. Right. And it's funny because middle class values is literally what they talked about in the book The Bell Curve as well, saying that, you know, a lot of people, because this is in the 90s when there was this whole thing about family values within the conservative Republican wing of American politics, and a lot of people on the left were trying to crap on the notion of family values. But as the authors of the Bell Curve described it, he's like they're just talking about middle class values. And here's the thing: middle class values have merit because in this in the long scheme of things, it has left it has given us uh, a a better society, right? So Dan Brown goes on to say, ghetto ratchet fatigue. How do decent, hardworking, law-abiding Black Americans separate and distinguish ourselves from these low-life hood rat skank degenerate thugs? He said, starting with manner of dress and public behavior. So I opted to I gave my own opinion on that, and I was like, not using loud. I was like not being loud and obnoxious. I was like keeping it classy, and networking with other Black professionals. I don't know if you saw that because that was on his YouTube, whereas this is on his Facebook. So, but yeah, again, this is not a new phenomenon. It's been talked about since the '90s, and I know uh, if it's been around in the '90s, it's probably talked about in the '80s as well. Um, Possibly Richard Pryor was talking about it in the '70s, like Moonlit said. Agus says like, share, and subscribe. All please and thanks. How love says unsustainable is what it is. Uh, I'm not shouting anyone out. You're gonna have to drop a cash app or send me a super chat. I've already said that. And Agus, my moderator, says the same thing. If you need a shout out, please drop a super chat. Carlton says a redneck is the white pookie. Now, you have two different uh, um, two different usages of the term redneck. For some uh, white Southerners, they embrace the term redneck as just meaning Southern white culture. So I've like I had a boss when I was in college who said that he's a proud redneck, but for him it didn't mean like degenerate a degenerate white person. He meant it meant like Southern white culture. That's what he saw it as. I didn't have a problem with that. I mean, if they're owning the term, go right on ahead. He was a great guy, by the way. Um, Hello says I call it low information ghetto hood rat fatigue. He said to me it has no color because I have white family who are the same. Yeah, so what we call white trash or crackers or rednecks. And then like the funny thing is, like I said, these didn't start off as slurs by black people against white people. This actually started with white people against other white people. And this is the same thing that's happening right now with black fatigue. This is something in the black community with black people addressing other black people. They want them to be accountable for their degenerate behavior. The same way that in the early US history, um, a lot of white people were calling out white Southerners for their degenerate behavior. Hello says I enjoy Dennis Sperling and T. Powell. I mean, sorry, Thomas Sowell. But I guess is that the mentality of our people, no respect for the elderly. If you see the behavior of my people on the train going to work at morning, it's dreadful. Shaking my head. Oh, don't get me started on that. It was, it was always a journey. Like this is what started me with keeping everyday carry weapons on me was having to take public transportation in Baltimore. Because I mean, there are people getting shot on the bus, getting beat up, people getting essayed, um, all sorts of crazy stuff. And I mean, you could totally be minding your business, and ninjas will be ninjas. Like I'm literally, it's like there was days like I'm literally just reading a book, and some drunk ass nigga, excuse my language, hound lover, but yeah, I'm literally just reading a book, and some drunk ass nigga sit down. And it's like, oh, what you reading over here? And start putting his hand in my book, like, what's this right here? See, I can read too, and see, I ain't as stupid as people don't think I'm stupid. I don't read this. Is what this say right here? The philosophy of materialism refers. I'm like, what the? Why the fuck is he reading my like this dumb shit? Black fatigue. So to sit there and say I'm trying, how so in my so how how within I just want to be left alone. Am I trying to make white people more comfortable? I'm trying to make myself more comfortable. Right? How am I appeasing white people? Because I don't want to be bothered by dudes who are loud and obnoxious, who are sitting there literally leering over me. This is before 2020, right? Because if this was 2020, I would have elbowed him during the whole mask mandate and stuff. Because I don't want some dirty motherfucker's germs on me. Goddamn monkey. But anyway, yeah, I said it. But but yeah, literally like over my shoulder, reading, putting his whole fucking hand in my book while I'm reading, as if he could understand. Like it is not. Yeah, I assume the nigga can read, but yeah, you're not understanding a graduate level philosophy textbook. Just because you can read it doesn't mean you're understanding what you're reading. And it's like, why do you bother me? Like, I'm literally just minding my own business, reading a book. This shit, or I'm walking back from a takeout, getting my lunch, when I'm in downtown, and this guy's like, "Yeah, I can see your cell phone out your pocket. I can just grab it." Like he literally says this. So I turned back and be like, oh yeah, nigga. Like that's how I felt. Like I'm at this point, I will kick you in the face. And when I turned around and said, oh yeah, nigga, he ain't say anything else. Cause I dress like a square, but I don't act like one. Harmless is he said not really. He said to me it's vile, but I get it. I hear you sparingly use it. It frustrates me when black people call each other the N word, but the moment that a white says it's a problem, that's my issue. Facts. Facts. That's fair. Carlson says context is key. Yep. He said context makes better sense. He said I've been called a hunky and a cracker too. Name callings for the weak minded. Yeah, like I said, the dude has been calling me racist for almost 10 years. Then he called me a coon and self hating because and I was like, you're not gonna get it. Like just because I don't agree with your opinions doesn't mean I'm self hating or a coon or racist. It's like you're not gonna race police me. You you do not make up the black intelligentsia that speaks for every black person. We don't our even within our black intelligentsia, they they don't speak for every black person. And the funny thing is, like half the black people feel and think the same way as I do. They are tired of the bull up. They're tired of the BS, and they're tired of people making excuses for these ratchets. We're tired of it. It's like you can point to white people being racist using the term black fatigue, but that doesn't change the fact that it's there and that there's more black people that experience it than white people because there's more black people who have to be around black people than white people. Homeless is kids today of all colors like basic human respect. Yeah, that I think that's a generational issue, but I don't want to steer this into a different space. Holland says, "Oh, I wouldn't put up with that. Get out of my personal space." Yeah, I mean, because you're sitting down, so it's already confined space, and you literally got someone leering over me. Like it was creepy. Or I had one dude, so I get on the bus, right? Again, minding my business. I get on the bus and sit down. He's sitting there talking to the bus operator, right? And after I sit down, mind you, this Negro is on crutches or whatever. He turns around like you took my seat. He said, I ought to be, kick your ass for that. Like, first of all, monkey, you are on crutches. I would really like to see you pull that off. And I'm pretty sure because that bus was actually headed to the hospital. So I'm like, yeah, that's funny. You're gonna beat my ass and you're already on crutches. On top of that, when you saw me sit down, like you didn't say anything until like you had finished your conversation and be like, "Oh, that's my seat." Mind you, this bus was not full. This was not a full bus. The bus was the bus was like half empty, and there was no one else sitting in the front. How am I supposed to know that this handicapped dude is about to had claimed this seat? If I was when I was walking towards the seat and he turned around and said, "Hey, homie, I was sitting there. If you don't mind," I'd have been like, "All right, cool, my bad." That's a little kindness gets you a long way. If he just said, "Hey, hey, homie, hey, brother, I was actually sitting there. If you don't mind," I'd be like, "All right, my bad. That's cool," and I would have sat somewhere else. But I plant myself down, and then he wants to turn around and walk up to me and talk trash. Black fatigue. This is black fatigue. When I go into a restaurant and people are cussing and fussing with the people with the food service, black fatigue. When I come through a drive-through and I ask the person a simple question and they're mad because I don't know everything already on the menu, as if I come to Popeyes every freaking day because that's where, because of course it was Popeyes, and I asked something, and they sit there and suck their teeth because I asked a question about something on the menu. It wasn't something outrageous like, "Hey, can I get a pizza?" It wasn't something. I was asking about something germane to the actual thing, like, is such and such on the menu? They're like, "No, that's not on the menu. But you need to." Like, even my friends, they were in the car. They was like, "What the f is wrong with her?" I was like, "I know, right? Like, this is black fatigue. It's 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 these little things every single day, and then it's sometimes big things like the violence. Carlos says the worst is when people come on the bus blasting these. Oh, yeah, it's like, luckily it's not the 80s and early 90s when people came onto the buses with the big ghetto blasters, but for some reason, people's freaking cell phones are loud as freaking hell, and that doesn't count as cussing, and a lot loud as I don't know what, and uh, it's like, turn, like, use some earbuds. Like, why do you think everyone else wants to hear your music? Like, that is some of the most ghetto ratchet stuff when people walk around blasting music as if you want to hear it. Like I said, this is not 1985 in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and you walking around with your ghetto blaster, which um and your name is Radio Raheem or whatever. Like, this is not, no. Just a white boy says everybody has black fatigue. It's getting to that point. Joe Joker Scott, what's up? He says, I'm ashamed to be a part of the generation I am. I was raised by my grandparents and I was taught to respect everyone, period, unless I'm legitimately in danger. But punks will be punks. That is so true, man. I do, like, again, I don't want to steer this into a different conversation, and I don't want to get this onto a beat up Generation Z sort of thing because I've done it plenty of times before. But there's, I think generationally, there is somewhat of a lack of respect for adults. And I think that becomes because there's a lack of, I think because of, I think part of that is due to a lot of fatherlessness in communities. So these young children aren't taught to respect adult males. I think that's part of that, and that does contribute to black fatigue because a lot of black communities are fatherless communities. By the way, shout out to the sexy Latina congresswoman who is fighting for Tory Lanez. This is why brothers are choosing Maria, Maricela, Rosa Marie, Lithia. I'm saying stop. I'm tripping. But nah, seriously, there is a bond. There is some sort of inextricable link between Latinas and black men. I don't know what it is, but like I said, you got Megan Thee Stallion trying to fry Tory Lanez and then lied in an interview with Gail, what's her name, Gail, whatever, Oprah's uh scissor buddy. But Gail King, right? She literally lied and said she never had a sexual relationship with Tory Tory Lanez. And then, when it came up later that she lied and Gail King said something about it, she literally called Gail King a B on her social media. Gail King didn't even say anything back. Didn't even you know didn't roast her for it for lying on her interview. But it was a Latina. Shout out to Representative Anna Paulina. Let me get her name uh, correct here. Anna Paulina Luna, who's stepping up and showing all the discrepancies in what Megan Thee Stallion said. That so-called weapon had numerous DNA on it, not just Tory Lanez, but they didn't check for anyone else's. This is black fatigue. This is what also leads black men to leave the community, to look for other women, like Latinas. Latinas are winning the black men. I personally prefer Asians, but Latinas are sexy. Shout out to any Latinas on here. Shout out to any Asians on here. Shout out to any snow bunnies on here. But anyway, she said Tory Lanez was sentenced to 10 years despite having no prior record, largely due to a firearm enhance, enhancement law now under scrutiny for racial bias. Black defendants face a 92% higher rate of this enhancement. That's not justice, that's discrimination. And by the way, this Latina representative in Congress, she is a Republican. She is not a Democrat. She is a Republican. She goes on to say the forensic evidence in the Lanes case was deeply flawed. 0.01% chance his DNA was on the firearm, 0% on the magazine, no fingerprints, DNA from 4 individuals found. Tory wasn't a primary contributor. Key gunshot residue tests never performed on others. This raises serious doubt. And she goes on to say, under California's Racial Justice Act and recent legislation limiting the use of rap lyrics and character evidence, Tory Lanez deserves a full review. His conviction was built on outdated and unconstitutional grounds. And if people are unaware, uh, Tory Lanez got stabbed up in prison and is on. He went into critical condition. So this man almost lost his life over something that he may not have done. This is black fatigue. And again, it was a Latina that stepped up to point this out, where Megan Thee Stallion and the other chick that he was stupidly dating, this which started the feud in the first place because her and her best friend, both her and her friend were smashing him, were letting him smash rather, even though she lied about it, but obviously she was. I mean, there's a whole picture of him like literally like on like got his dick all over her butt, even though she's a man, but whatever. I'm joking, but she looks like one. She calls herself a stallion, which is a male horse, but whatever. Um, this is black fatigue. You are really willing to destroy this man's whole life. Like, mind you, Tory has some pooky ways. I am not gonna deny that nor defend the fact that he has some pooky behavior. But I'm not willing to let someone lose it all on a lie. And no one in the black community stepped up to help him. It was a Latina congresswoman who's a Republican. Black fatigue, guys. Jackie Chan, I'm not sure what you're saying is helpful here. Um, the whole thing about go back to the country you people came from is not useful if we're talking about white and black people because, uh, I mean, if you're a white person here in the country legally, you're not being sent back. If you are of any country here and you are here legally, you're not being sent back. If you're a black, if you're a foundational black American, you're not being sent back because you have nowhere to go to. This is literally our country. Like, if you sent a foundational black American to Africa or to the Caribbean, you just giving them a free vacation because we're not from those places. And it's too late to say you need to go back to Africa. All right, where? What part? It's like, bro, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you saying that Jackie Chan Jr., but the point where people say that it's just not helpful. The only time you can really use that slur against someone is if they're a illegal immigrant. Other than that, you can't use it against people whose family goes back generations. And the funny thing about foundational Black Americans is we have some of the we have some of the longest lineage here in America. This is why we started delineating ourselves from Black immigrants who came here back in the 70s and 80s, because a lot of these Caribbean and African folks only came here after the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act, and they have always saw themselves as better than the foundational Black Americans here. But now that they're facing scrutiny with Trump's deportation policies, they want to say, "Well, we're one of you." You know, y'all weren't claiming us before. It's like, no, foundational Black Americans, we have a lineage that literally goes back to 1619, which means we were here a year before the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock in 1620, because our ancestors landed in Jamestown, Virginia in 1619, and most of them weren't weren't even slaves. They were indentured servants and ended up becoming free and forming the first Black elite here in America. So there you go. Um, but I don't. Again, no one should feel ashamed for what their ancestors did or didn't do, because you can't control that. Now, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be restorative policies in place for the injustices of the past. Just that people themselves shouldn't feel any shame for what may or may not have occurred back then with their own group. If that is helpful. Of course, my musician friend would say, "Oh, there you go, trying to trying to comfort white people." I'm not trying to comfort anyone. I'm being rational. It's like, dude, like literally every race under the face of the earth has been enslaved at one point. The term slaves even comes from people of Eastern Europe, the Slavic people. Moreover, during the transatlantic slave trade, here's the thing: it was the Western world that ended slavery before any other parts of the world. Like, you can blame folks for us coming here, white folks for us coming here, but it was Great Britain and then later the United States that were the first two countries to end slavery in the in that in that time in the world. Brazil was the last country to end slavery in the New World, right? The transatlantic slave trade ended in 1808, although slavery still endured in America till 1863, and was uh, fully stopped in 1865 when after the end of the Civil War and the Juneteenth, when when it was still going on up until some Union soldiers came by this town in Texas and was like, yeah, you guys are free. They was like, what? Man, God, it was not funny. But Juneteenth was, unfortunately, there was de facto slavery still going on after 1865 through sharecropping, through some dubious sharecropping methods, and through the black codes where people would be locked up just so they could be enslaved through through the penitentiary. So, but we don't have to go through all that. The point is, back on the other side of the pond, um, in Africa, not only like not only were these Africans selling um, other Black Africans to Europe, which got and having them brought to the United States and Latin America and the Caribbean, but they were also engaging in enslaving white people. Some people still don't know this from world history. There was the Barbary slave trade where North Africans were enslaving white people and probably enslaved more were sent across the transatlantic. On top of that, then the black people are also enslaving black people and sending them to the Middle East through the Arabic slave trade, which still goes on today. It's just not legal anymore, but it's still literally happening. As I've mentioned before, Mauritania was the last country to make slavery illegal. They officially made it illegal in 2003, but didn't criminalize it until 2015. Yes, literally 2015. Slavery was still going on in Mauritania without any penalties. Even though they had officially made it illegal in 2003, they didn't criminalize it until 2015. So when we have black people coming over from Africa calling us akatas and talking down on foundational Black Americans, this is more Black fatigue. We don't want to hear from these mother freakers who sold us into bondage talking trash. Here's the thing: they can talk trash about Black Americans being lazy and you need to work harder, work harder. If you work harder, you'll have it. Because they'll say, I come here to America, and I already own property. I have my master's degree in mechanical engineering. Well, good for you, Jeffrey. But here's the thing: you wouldn't have gotten here unless, except for the fact that our civil rights leaders fought for non-white immigrants to come here through the Immigration Naturalization Act of 1965. Or your butt would still be in Nigeria or Chad or Cameroon or Cote d'Ivoire or Niger or Kenya or Sudan, or wherever, right? And you're talking trash. And I was like, you had to flee your country. We fought for our freedom here. We didn't flee. We stayed here and grinded it out and fought for what we got. And you can say a lot of us aren't successful. That's true. But there's more Black millionaires in America than anywhere else in the world. There's about roughly about what 1,500 Black millionaires in the U.S. alone, more than anywhere else in the world, which is bad because there's 54 nations in Africa, of which sub-Saharan Africa makes up about 40 something of those countries. So out of those 40 something countries, y'all can't rustle up together more millionaires than one country, which is the United States. Who's really doing better than who, Jeffrey? Black fatigue. All right, I know guys going to rant. So let me check these comments. Jojo also agree punks because punks will be punks. I don't know if this guy shouldn't feel shame. Yeah, I think I already talked about it. Jojo says I'll try my best hound lover. Hound says I'll never understand people looking for fights. Why are they so angry? How people look for fights because they're just miserable, and sometimes misery loves company. Like I said, if someone's sitting there literally chilling, not bothering you, why would you provoke them? Especially you don't know what this person knows. Like this guy doesn't know. Hey, I'm like literally a martial arts coach. I'm an army veteran, and he's already on crutches. Do you think I would not take the crutch and beat him with it? He's talking trash because I sat in the seat. If he, like I said, if he literally said, "Hey, brother, would you mind?" I was already sitting there. I would have gladly said, "Oh, my bad," and just sat somewhere else. How hard is that? But you want to wait till I already planted myself, and you having a full conversation with this bus operator to turn around and try to bogart your seat. So you like, I was like, so you willing to get the other leg broken, right? um, Carlton says Neely Fuller Jr. said black people should avoid each other unless they're doing something productive. Right. So that's why when Dennis Berlin said, "What should Black people do um, to reduce Black fatigue?" And that's what I was saying. Um, avoid being loud and obnoxious, keeping it classy, and in public, and networking with other Black professionals, because that's the best. Like, professionalism breeds more professionalism. Professionalism doesn't mean just working a profession. It means it's also a sort of decorum, right? So, Hound says, "Scott, it's all you can do. Can't control others, but people do watch, so doing the right thing is important." And he says, Hound also says, "You to Carlton, you think avoidance works, or is it necessary? I think these conversations are necessary." Hound says, "Yeah, Luna. Yep, yep. Yeah, I got it. Caught it. Thank you, though, bro." Cardinal says, "Yeah, conversations are needed as long as something productive comes from it." Cardinal says, "Some people are riding with Megan because she's still FBI. Still FBI, even though she most likely lied on him." Yeah, I don't trust anything she said. Like, if you're gonna lie about having a sexual relationship with him, what aren't you lying about? Especially, like I said, they they didn't go all out with this, with talking about this gun. What it seems like happened is that um Tory may have fell on the blade for someone else. Like, he, he pretty much said that he was at fault in court, and that might have been just because he was just being a stand up dude. Doesn't mean that he was actually guilty of what he's pled out to. We know as a fact of the justice system that people often plead to things of which they're not actually guilty for various reasons, whether to get a lesser because they're afraid of getting convicted of something worse, um, because they don't want certain details to come out, even though they're not guilty, or they could be protecting someone else, or they don't think they'll get a fair shot, so they'll just plead out. And that happens a lot of times because most defendants can't afford a a a pup a defending a lawyer to defend them who's a good litigant. They'll probably just get a public defender who has like a caseload of 300 other cases, and they got to decide who to give to the prosecutor and whom they'll actually fight for. However, says to Carlton, agree. Carlton says, "What's funny is that white people created racism." Well, I won't say that. White people didn't create racism. Racism is just another form of tribalism. And it's tribalism, or as it's called in behavioral research, in-group bias, has always been around. It's part of the human condition. If Trust me, if all of us were the same color, we would still find different reasons to dislike each other. Because I mean, there's a prediction that somewhere in the future we're all going to look like Bruno Mars, more or less. I remember that in the '90s, like it was on the cover of I think it was either on the cover of like U.S. News and World Report, or Life magazine or Time magazine, something like that. And it was showing how in the future all of us were going to have this like this indeterminable olive skin racial makeup. So basically, we're all like Bruno Mars or Cassidy. So, anywho, so the funny thing, if you're so I think what Carlton might be referring to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Carlton. I think you're referring to white how whiteness has been defined amongst Caucasian people, right? Because it's sort of the concept of whiteness has centered around racism in the Western world. Basically, if you fall within their concept of whiteness, you are part of the in group, and anyone who doesn't is 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 it's not is no is considered part of the outside group and not one of us. You're not part of the He-Man woman haters group. You're one of them. You're not one of us. Or like in the Costa Nostra, he's a friend of ours, as opposed to, you know. So, but the concept of whiteness has changed over the past few millennia. So if we go back to the earliest concept of whiteness, we're going all the way back to ancient Greece and Rome. For the ancient Greeks, anyone else anyone outside of the Hellenic world was not considered white. They were considered barbarians. Like, and this would refer to other white people. Like, if you were a white person from Northern Europe or Eastern Europe, you were not part of the Hellenic world. So they considered those people over in those brutish people over in those Germanic tribes, those people up in the those Celtic people in the north, um, some of those people further east. They were all just barbarians to them. They didn't consider them white. If you were not in the Hellenic world, if you were not part of one of the Greek city states, like Athens or Corinth or Sparta, Thebes. I mean, not Thebes. Whatever. But you get it. If you weren't if you weren't within the part of the Athenian city states, you were considered a barbarian. You weren't considered white. If you weren't Greek, you weren't white, right? And even though most of the people they didn't consider white, we would consider white today. You jump up to like the modern era, the 16, 1700s. For them to be white the meant having a Germanic or Anglo-Saxon type of origins. The further you stray from that, the less white you were, even if you were still literally white. So people who were left out of this fold were people like the Irish, the Scottish, Southern Europeans, who formerly were the white people in the Greek world, but left out Southern Europeans, Eastern Europeans, Irish folks, Scottish people, and they brought that to America. Like, there in America, they used to say no Italians, no Irish. Like, this is why a lot of them, the earliest jobs they could ever get was like in the fire department and the police department. So those are the only places that would hire them. This is why the whole cracker behavior started in the antebellum South, as described by Thomas Sowell, because they considered them less than. Italians weren't considered white until probably the, I don't know, the 1950s, 1960s. Jewish people still battle with that today. Like, they were all, just like you have historically black colleges and universities, they were all Jewish colleges back then too, because they weren't allowed to go to mainstream colleges like Harvard and Stanford and all those places. They had to go to Jewish schools, just like black people had to go to black schools. So it's the concept of whiteness changed over the time, and a, a that's about which you you get this sort of racism around who's white and who isn't, and that's how you get this whole one drop of one the one drop rule, that if you have a drop of black in you, you're not white. Well, I gotta tell you, that would probably mean most white people in the South aren't really white, because there's an old saying, and excuse my language here, hound lover, but there's an old saying in the South that if you look far enough in a white person's family tree in the South, a nigga will fall out. Just saying, because in the uh, population genetics kind of bears that out. Um, but again, the funny thing is when we're talking about black fatigue, this is normally something within the black community that now is spilled over into mainstream society. But the irony is this was talked about a long time ago amongst white people about other white people. There was white fatigue amongst white people for white Southerners. And in fact, a lot uh, white Southerners and black people had a strong cultural bond at the time, which is one of the reasons why in American racism, the way they had they to way to disenfranchise these black people was to tell the white Southerners, hey, you're one of us now. Don't set yourself. You need to set yourselves apart from these black people because they're not one of us. They're not even human. So they basically conned white Southerners into into um, basically uh, giving up the natural social bond they had with black people at the time by telling them you're one of us, so that they could feel the prestige of being white alongside these successful plantation owners and these successful north northerners. Um, Even though culturally they really had nothing in common with these super rich plantation owners or these northern white folks, other than literally than their skin, their cultural whereas their cultural milieu was the same as those black people in the South. Uh, Joker says this country is built on immigrants, even if our history is questionable, but we are the future as a country and community. Partly so is built on immigrants, but I'll say it's built on the backs of slavery. Like literally, you can go through Washington D.C. Most of the stuff in D.C. was built on slave labor, literally, from the Washington Monument to the White House to you know the Capitol building, all that sort of stuff, literally built on the backs of slaves. Six, corp, the mega corporations around today, most of them got their start through slave labor. Immigrants became a thing after slavery was no longer a thing because they still needed cheap labor. But this is why Black Americans call us are now using the term foundational Black Americans. We are the foundation of America. It was on the slaves are the foundation of America's current current wealth and power. Free labor. um, and again, this is sort of the stuff that my musician friend never hears me talk about and claims that I'm racist. But if he heard me saying this, he would probably largely agree with most of what I'm saying, most of it. But to him, he would never hear me say this. All he sees is what he wants to disagree with me about. Uh, Agus says, please drink some water. I will. Check something. Oh, it's getting late. Late, late. Late, 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 late. Um, However, says Joe Jokers, I agree. However, they need to come through the front door and be vetted just like my ancestors did. And so, and that's the other problem is when people say we're all immigrants. Black people aren't immigrants. We are the descendants of people who were trafficked here in bondage. So, not the same. Like black, there's two groups of people here who were never immigrants. The Native Americans who've always been here since they crossed the Bering Strait um, about I guess about 100,000 years ago. They're actually Asian people. Native Americans are actually the descendants of Asian people of East Asian people who crossed into this land, which is why East Asians and Native Americans look so much alike because genetically. They are like they both. Many of them both share the ABC gene variant, the ABC11 gene variant, which shows a common uh, genetic ancestry. Um, but they were here, so they were never immigrants. Um, and Black Americans were never immigrants because we were brought here in bondage. Someone who's brought here in bondage is not an immigrant. They are they are victims of human trafficking. Like if you know, so if you know if people are stolen and brought somewhere else, would you call them immigrants? No, I don't think so. And this is still, I mean, like I said, because this still happens today in so-called, they call it so-called white slavery, where a lot of people are kidnapped and trafficked to other places for the purposes of usually sex. What something people don't know about that, and this is a quick aside. Everyone assumes it's mostly women or girls. A dirty secret of the sex slavery that goes on today is that most of these are young boys, not girls. Most of these people, most of these people who are kidnapped and trafficked for the purposes of sex are young boys. Just saying. Cardin says white immigrants built those New York skyscrapers. I'll give them that. I don't see any black people in those old photos sitting on a steel beam eating lunch on their breaks. Well, so some of the earliest people in modern day New York City, outside of the indigenous people, of course, were the Knickerbockers. That's where the term, if people don't know why they call the basketball team the New York Knicks, stands for the Knickerbockers. Those were the Dutch people who originally settled in New York City, and they used the original the city was originally called New Amsterdam, and so a lot of the so a lot of the first European immigrants who still live there are notoriously wealthy, and they're called old Knickerbockers. Some of you might notice if you ever watch Mad Men, one of the characters was a Knickerbocker in New York and came from a very prestigious family. And his father said, because he was like, "Well, you never gave me anything." The father was like, "I gave you my last name." So if you never saw Mad Men, there you go. And by the way, I just saw Mad Men last year, so I just saw the end of Breaking Bad today. Sorry, I'm slow with those things, but these were shows I didn't think I would have interest in initially, and then I looked into them, and they're awesome. But no, there was slavery even in the North, so that's another that's another mistake that people think that black slaves were only in the antebellum South. That's not true. They were actually everywhere until it was made illegal in the North and in some of the U.S. territories out west. Until like they actually made it illegal in those territories and in the northern states, there was slavery everywhere in America. Part of the reason why the U.S. government, after the Mexican War, decided not to incorporate Mexico into the United States, part of the reason was because um, they didn't want to extend slavery further south by incorporating it into what is now Mexico after we won the Mexican War. Another reason, and this is a racist reason, but hey, history is messy, right? Another reason is because they said they didn't want all these little brown men to become American citizens. So uh, call it call it whatever you want to see it as, but yeah, part of the reason why the Mexico did never became part of the United States after we kicked their butts in the Mexican Wars, because they didn't. It's because half, half of the government didn't want Mexico to be extended this this slave the slave holding South, and then a bunch of them also didn't want to extend citizenship to all the um, native Mexican people. Um, Carlton says Asians came from the sand people in Africa. Not really. That's not necessarily true. Asians, look. So depending on which migration theory people hold, and there's evidence for both. There's the out of migration theory of Africa, and then there's the other theory where everyone. Okay, so let me explain. So we all know that humanity started in southern Africa, right? The question has been whether humans diversified before they left Africa, or whether they went to different parts of the world and then they diversified. A lot of the evidence is showing that there was just one proto human people that went out and migrated out of Africa and then independently diversified to their geographical settings. So people, and this is borne out by recent evidence today. Also, if you have not seen this, National Geographic and others have pointed this out in recent news, that the earliest Europeans were brown skinned. They were not white skinned or pale skinned. So the earliest Europeans were brown skinned. That makes sense, and that gives more credence to the out of Africa migration theory that says that basically all the people who initially left Africa were the same folks, and then they later diversified to their geographic settings. So the people who initially went into Europe were brown people, and they became paler to adapt to the lack of sun. The people who ventured out further east into the Central Asian steppes that became the East Asians. The people who went south, developed into the Desi Indian people, and further into the Pacific Islanders, right? so so Asians uh, did not start from the same people. What is a fact, though, Carlton, is that we have the most genetic diversity within the continent of Africa. Now, that is true. There's the most genetic diversity in human populations in Africa, but Asians did not start from the same people. They started from people who originally settled in the Central Asian steppes, and the people of the Central Asian steppes developed epicanthic folds across their eyes, or their slanted eyes, as sort of sun goggles against the glare of the sun in the Central Asian steppes. And in any place where you might have that sort of similar sort of geographic condition, I'm guessing those people would also develop epicanthic folds on their eyes. But they didn't start from the sand people. That would be that would be that would take a lot of evidence to prove that one group of people traveled all the way out to the Central Asian steppes and then further diversified into different parts of East Asia, instead of just saying it was just one human population who left Africa and then later diversified in those different geographic settings in which they found themselves. That seems to be, we have the most evidence for that currently, although it seems to be that in a combination of there might have been a little bit of diversity of the people who left out of Africa. Hound says, thank you for acknowledging slavery has occurred across every race. You shouldn't have to thank me. I mean, it should just be it, it should just be common sense that slavery was just a normal part of ancient civilization. I mean, people who can't acknowledge that just aren't being honest because slavery slavery was literally practiced everywhere in the ancient world, literally everywhere. Everyone's everyone has family that was that if you trace your ancestry far enough, you're gonna bump into a slave. And I don't care where, like I don't care where, Asia, Europe, Africa, or Latin America, they all practice slavery. Native Americans did, Africans did, Europeans did, Asians did, Pacific Islanders did. What isn't what isn't given credit though is the fact that it was in the the Western world where it first ended. It is in Great Britain was the first ones to end to end the African slave trade, and then later America, and then like I said, Brazil was the last country in the New World to end it. But back on the other side of the pond, they were still open, like still openly doing it. And like I said, it didn't. The last country to fully make to end it, even though it still goes on, was Mauritania in 2015, which is not a long time ago. 2015 is when the MCU had Captain America: Civil War come out, so that's not a long time ago. We still, your iPhone still might work from that time. Claire says the out of African theory has apparently become less of a consensus lately. Like I said, it's not. No, there's good consensus on it. Like I was saying, that what happened now is now the two competing theories have started to merge as more evidence has shown that that the, that the theory that it was all one population that left Africa and then later diversified in different parts of the world has gotten the most evidence for it today, especially now in light of the evidence showing that the early Europeans were brown skinned. There's a lot of white supremacists that would deny that. They were like, "There ain't no goddamn way." But yeah, I love science. Science doesn't care about your ideology. Neither does philosophy. Carden says the people who migrated out of Africa made it with Neanderthals. I think. Well, yes, in Europe they did. I have Neanderthal ancestry. Anyone who has basically anyone who has Western who has European ancestry probably has Neanderthal in them, some bit of Neanderthal in them. I have Neanderthal in me. I've literally seen my genetic makeup, which I actually did here on a live stream a long time ago, guys. Last year, it was either last year or 2023, but I no, it was last year, early last year, early 2024. I literally read off my genetic history, right? I have a little bit of Neanderthal in me. Um, Whereas there are there was another human population that coexisted with modern humans, not just Neanderthals. There was Denisovans. So if you have Asian ancestry, you probably have Denisovan in you. Now we don't know what the Denisovans look like. We don't have any fossil. We have very little fossil records of them. Whereas at least with Neanderthals, we have like full skulls and sometimes skeletal remains to piece together what they look like. We don't really have any of that with the Denisovans, other than we know that like almost all early humans at the time, they would have had they would have had a heavy brow and probably more, heavy musculature. But yeah. Anyway, getting back to the black fatigue, guys, because we've gone way astray from that. The point I'm making is that Black fatigue is not a it's not a thing to appease. It's not a thing. It's not something that is talked about mainly by racists. Black fatigue is mostly talked about amongst other black people, about black people with about about whom they disagree with their ratchet behavior. Like I said, it's more black people talking about black fatigue than anyone else because we're the ones who have to deal with it the most because we're around each other the most. I mean, America is highly segregated, so people are most likely going to live in communities amongst other people who share their ancestry. If you're white, you're most likely going to live around other white people. If you're black, you're most likely going to live around other black people. Asian depends. if you if you are a West Coast Asian, you're probably going to live amongst other Asians. But if you live in outside of that conclave of the West Coast, you might live around mostly white people, unless you are maybe like one of the Asian groups that come from the refugee groups, like Southeast Asians, like Vietnamese, Cambodians, the Hmong, or others. They might live more around black people in the hood. Um, in any case, black fatigue is not a new phenomenon. It may be a new word, but it's not even a new word because literally, the literally there was a book published about it 5 years ago, and it's been talked about at least since the 80s and 90s, at least since the 80s and 90s. But I will hazard that is it goes back much further than that, as my moderator opined earlier that he believes that Richard Pryor spoke about black fatigue in the early comedy album back in the 70s. Um, Black people have always been frustrated by other black people. So again, so we know that black fatigue exists for a long time. And so I don't know if Richard Pryor talked about it per se because I haven't heard it himself, but I know before it was talked about in the 90s, it has been mentioned before early in the past. So for instance, when the migration of southern black people started, when they started moving north, um, when they I remember um, when they started moving to LA, the black people in LA did not want these black Southerners coming to LA and messing up what they had there. They felt as if the black Southerners were a bit uncouth and 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 ratchet, and they didn't want them coming to Los Angeles and messing it up. This happened in the early 20th century with the migration waves of black Southerners in the early 1900s. Um, Likewise, like you saw, like here on the East Coast, we know most of the black people in places like Baltimore, New York, New Jersey, um, Philly, Pittsburgh, all these other places on the East Coast. These are all mostly people from North and South Carolina, whereas the people in the Midwest mostly come from places like Georgia and those sorts of southern states. People who who gravitated towards California came from places like Texas. Those were the migration patterns of Southerners into the northern states, and many times the black people who were already situated in those northern cities didn't want those southern black people coming there because they thought that they would bring sort of that southern ratchet behavior with them. Like I said, because the southern ratchet behavior started with white southerners, and black people started to pick up that sort of culture, black rednecks culture, which is now what we call ghetto behavior, but it's black rednecks. And black people, even back in the early 1900s, did not want these black Southerners coming to their northern cities, bringing their ratchet behavior with them. They didn't call it ratchet back then. They didn't call it black fatigue back then, but that is what they meant. Hounds, this is the when you talking about slavery, he says it should be common sense, but it is in our education system. It's failing our children big time. According to some people say we're not owed reparations because everyone was a slave at one point. Yeah, so I'm not. Yeah, so Thomas Sowell does make that point. So, but Thomas Sowell's bigger point, and I understand his point, but I don't fully agree. He's basically saying that he's against um any sort of economic policies to redress historical wrongs. He thinks that's a mistake, even though it has been done many times in the past. He's at least Thomas, like, you can disagree with Thomas Sowell on this, but at least he's internally consistent with it. He's saying every time there was a redressing of historical wrongs through economic measures, it was always a bad idea because it takes away um, people's ability to better themselves through and merit and achievement, the very things that bring success to any group of people in the very first place. And he was like, so the redressing of wrongs to Native Americans was wrong through economic policies. He said the addressing of the survivors of the Holocaust he thought was wrong because he said, you know, so he makes that case. I don't agree with him because he can say, well, I can see where he's saying it, but I'm going to be, I think it's also internally consistent to say, well, if these other people have been addressed for their wrongs economically, then so should we. But it should be lineage based. Um, Hound says, I don't think holding modern people responsible for excuse me, for what their ancestors did is appropriate or should be done at all. Um, Again, yes and no. I think there should be lineage based reparations for foundational Black Americans, not only because of slavery, but because even after slavery, you still had de facto slavery through sharecropping, the Black codes, right? Then you then even after that, you further disenfranchise people through redlining and Jim Crow, and through um, the white supremacy groups like the KKK and others. Um, so it not only that, the fact that there was going to be a measure in Congress during the Reconstruction era in which a lot of these people were going to be given reparations, the whole so-called 40 acres and a mule sort of thing. Um, but it got shut down by, like, what was it, one or two votes? Uh, and you can say, well, that was then. How does that affect now? So my thing is, it can be done. It can be done. Um, should it be done? I say it should be only because if other groups have received um, um, wrongs that were redressed, the you know the Japanese survivors of the during the internment camps, again, Germany addressing the Jewish Holocaust survivors, the Native Americans through different federal policies, then Black people should be afforded those things too. The funny thing is, anytime we did get some sort of way to redress historical wrongs, it got taken from us and spread out to other minorities. Affirmative action was such a policy. It was supposed to address um, the economic disenfranchisement of Black people, but it quickly got shared to all ethnic minorities, and then became the used the most by not minorities but by white women. And then, DEI was just affirmative action 2.0. And again, with DEI, most of the executives in these DEI positions were white women. um, so in either case, most black people was like, whatever, I don't care. Like it's not even helping us. Whenever there was like people who were minorities who did receive benefits through affirmative action or through DEI, they're not even foundational black Americans. They were Latino, they were Asian. Asians received a lot through affirmative action, even though they were some of the main people who went against it in college admissions. Their problem should have been against college the college admission policies, not against affirmative action itself. They should have went against Harvard and said Harvard is being racist for not letting more of us in when we are qualified to be in here. Not only qualified, most of us are overqualified to be here, and you're simply rejecting us because you don't want a student body population that is mostly Asian because they would have been the most qualified for most of those positions on campus. Instead, they decided we're going to attack affirmative action when at the time Black Americans weren't even the main benefactors of it. White women were. So how's that? The problem with sour grapes is it can be used to make it can be used to make wine. So yeah. Clara says slavery still isn't outlawed in America. It's just used for punitive reasons now. No, it is outlawed here. What you're talking about is that it's still that people who are serving who are in prison can still be sentenced um, un, to unpaid labor, which is slavery. But we're not talking about convicted people. We're talking about free people. So that's not true. Now, again, that was one of the very ways in which they kept a lot of black people enslaved in the late 1800s up until the early 1900s was through the black codes. That's what the black codes did. The black codes were a bunch of punitive laws passed in the American South to get people to lock black people up for spurious reasons just so they could force them into unpaid labor. Then there was also the sharecroppers who often um, pay pay the black people a very low wage or sometimes neglected to pay them at all. So between the share and in fact during World War II, that one of the psyops used by the Axis powers was trying to shame America for the fact that they were still treating black sharecroppers as slaves. That was one of the psyops they used at the time, saying black Americans, you shouldn't be fighting. You shouldn't be fighting for these people. They still treat you like slaves. That was a psyop used in World War II by the Axis powers. So guess what America did in response? They stopped sharecropping. Shaming can be a powerful tactic. Clara says, I've seen some tabloids claiming that an out of Asia theory was viable, but I didn't read further, to be honest. Hound says, my DNA wasn't even on this continent when slavery occurred in the USA. Well, yes, but here's the thing. If someone still is reaping the benefits of what happened in the past, then that still needs to be redressed. If corporations, if people living off the benefits of what those slaves did are benefiting from it today, then it still needs to be redressed. That's the thing. And that's that I think that is the most powerful argument for reparations today is that even if people had nothing to do with it back then, because none of us did, right? Even if some of the Europeans today, because most Europeans came to America in the late 1800s and early 1900s, before, after slavery ended, still reap the benefits of of what the slaves did for this country, either through the corporations, through the land, through the infrastructure, and other sorts of things. uh, then yeah, and there's been people who are much more erudite in that they can point all those sorts of things out. I'm not here to do that because I'm just here to talk about black fatigue. What I can say is that, and again, the fact that other ethnic groups who have been wronged have received their redressing of those wrongs. Like I said, the people who stayed in the Japanese internment camps, right? Um, Many of the federally recognized Native American tribes, uh, the Holocaust survivors in Germany, and some other historical groups. Now, like I said, apologies for the wrongs, because that breeds laziness and keeps people from trying to achieve the merit, because we've all been done wrong at some point in history. So we all should just kind of buck up and um, do better through um, striving for education, working hard, and self discipline, and these sorts of things. And he's not wrong, but two things can be mutually true. People should advance their groups and individually through self discipline, through pursuit of education, through hard work, while also receiving um, these redressings of these historical wrongs, especially when there are some groups who still won't even admit that these things happen, or they deny the severity of these things happening. Look at Turkey, for example, still denying the Armenian genocide. And there's many other examples like that. Uh, Clara says, however, well, the idea for reparations isn't to punish white people. Exactly, it's not a punishment. Now, the people who do put now, let's be honest, there are some people like my musician friend who would see it as a punishment to these folks. No one's going to go for that. Like, that's not, first of all, just on a pragmatic level, pushing something as a punishment to other people is not it's not a savvy way to do things, right? That should be obvious. The other thing is, it's not a punishment, it's a correction. It's a correctional, is it's a correction of something that happened in the past, not something to punish people in the future, saying we're going to punish you for what your people did to us in the past. That's just stupid. And I would say that of any group, to sit there and punish people in the present for the for the crimes of their ancestors would just be stupid. So if people are looking at reparations in that sense, I get why they would be against it, because I would be against it in that way too. It is not to punish the scion of people who did something wrong hundreds and hundreds of years ago. That's just stupid. Instead, is to correct something that needed to be corrected. For instance, look at what the major leagues did recently, 2 years ago. In the major leagues, to redress the wrongs that happened in the past, in the early 20th century, they added all the people from the Negro leagues officially into the major leagues. That's a redressing of a historical wrong. It wasn't it's not to punish the current athletes in the major leagues, and nor is it to punish the people back then either, because you can't punish people who aren't alive anymore, right? But it's not to punish those folks either. In fact, many of the major leaguers back in the day were in admiration of those Negro League players. People like Babe Ruth, who's the most of us would consider Babe Ruth. He is the goat of baseball. He had huge admiration for the Negro League players, right? So The fact that the major leagues went on to add the stats of all these players from the Negro leagues officially into the major leagues, that to me that was a huge big up. But it wasn't to punish people. It wasn't to punish today's athletes in the major leagues. It was to correct a wrong, a historical wrong from the past. That's how a lot of us consider reparations today. We don't see it as a punishment of people today. We see it as a redressing of the wrong done in the past. Now we can still have strong feelings on it, right? And we can disagree. That's fine. But I'm gonna get back to black fatigue. And so, like Clara said, the idea for reparations isn't to punish white people; it's to pay black people the debt they are owed for their labor during slavery and their oppression during Jim Crow. And like I said, it's not just during slavery, but then there was the black codes, the sharecropping, the redlining, the Jim Crow, um, the era of the terrorism through white supremacist groups. All of those things are what factors into the move for reparations today. Carlton says, however, the government is who is responsible because the same government back then exists now. Well, kind of facts. I guess it's just we are living around our own race. Um, John says, I'm disgusted that my family line used to do such awful things to the poor souls. Again, I feel you on that. But again, we should not draw, well, I think it's a mistake to look at what our ancestors did or didn't do and be shameful of it because we had nothing to do with it. And like I said, if you look in anyone's past, I don't care who it is, they're going to have some people in their ancestry of which they would be of who have done horrendous things in the past. There's not, I would dare anyone, if they had the access to such documentation, that they could not go into their past and find that their ancestors somewhere down the line did some horrendous things. Most of us wouldn't be here if our ancestors didn't do some horrendous things, right? Look at Black Americans. Black. The reason why Black Americans and Africans don't look the same is because, on average, Black Americans have about 20% European DNA on average. So it can be more than that, and we know how that happened. Now, it didn't all like most. So the 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 mistake is thinking that all the racial intermingling that led to Black Americans was forced. That's not necessarily true. A lot of it was consensual. Look, as this white woman said on this Instagram post, which is hilarious how she put it. But I'm not going to try to put it in the funny way she did. Look, a lot of our ancestors like to get it on with other groups. There's always been an interracial hanky panky, but the pro blackity blacks and the white supremacists will have you believe that we have that we're all pure blooded blah blah blah, and population genetics just debunks that notion. Hound Lover says, yeah, unfortunately, that's the truth to Carlton. He said, yes, look at the Native Americans. That's an example of what happens when economic redress is given. Facts. Agnes says, my grandparents moved to New York in the 50s. I was told because they were fed up of living and no opportunity. Yeah, like I said, PBS recently did a whole thing on the Black migration, narrated by um, what's his name, Henry Louis Gates Jr. Really good show. I only saw the first part. There's still two parts I haven't seen. Um, but it's a good documentary. PBS, despite going through what it's going through politically, they have some good stuff on it. Yes, they do have a lot of left leaning stuff on PBS. That's it would be dishonest to say they don't have left leaning stuff on PBS, but they also do really have genuinely good. historical and scientific content on PBS, which is why I love PBS. Uh, Carlton says even the Freedman Bank was taken away. Ounces DI is disgusting. Agreed. Agus says they didn't want my mom growing up in North Carolina. My grandfather was saying he would go back. My grandmother's said, "Oh no." Carlton says black fatigue is like doing the plank exercise. It's painful. That depends on how long you're doing it. Pause. But that's also what she said. But no, but no. So yeah, I've recently started doing planks because I was always more of a sit up guy and flutter kicks. I don't like the plank because you can just sit there and watch TV while you're doing it. Um, but that's neither here nor there. I digress. House says that's exactly what's going on in South Africa. Scipio's the brave. Scipio, you're probably not American. You sound like a fucking idiot. Guys, excuse my French. I guess I owe you 10 push-ups. But yeah, Scipio the Brave is a moron. He says name one black scientist. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Benjamin Banneker, um, that Dr. Benjamin Banneker, excuse me, Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Hmm. How far you want me to keep going with this? Um, okay. Uh, Dr. Leslie Thompson. Hmm. Shall I keep going? How many black scientists do you need before you shut the fuck up? That's another push up. Sorry. What I'm about to say is a roast here, guys, so this does not count to my push ups, but tell Scipio the Brave he can suck every inch of my dick, lick it around and around, because I'm sure he loves chocolate. He probably takes it up the butt just like his mother does, because she's a champ. She's a champ in the anal game. She's a legend on these streets for taking it up the ass in a biblical sense. We're family friendly here. She takes it in the ass in a biblical sense. Now, Scipio, see, he does it for the love of the game. His mom did it because she had to pay. She had to pay for his. She had to pay for his Lunchables every day. She had to pay for his Excuse me, his Lunchables, and she had to pay for that little helmet he wears on the little short bus that he goes to school with. Now he just stays at home and paints his wall while he getting done up the ass. Don't you, Scipio the Brave? You enjoy that, don't you? You enjoy the anal game, right? Just for the pure love of getting BBC up your butt. That's what you love, Scipio. Scipio the Brave. That's why he's brave, guys. He's brave enough to take that BBC every night. Brave. The brave. The bold. The BBC in his ass. That's what Scipio likes. So everyone say hello to Scipio the Brave because he's brave enough to take that BBC in his ass every night for the love of the game because he learned it from his mother how she used to take that pipe so she could afford those Lunchables for him every night. She couldn't cook worth a damn, but she could take that lead like Super Mario going through the next level. That's when the Nick. That's when the dude nutted in there. When she got to that next level, sound like a Super Mario superstar. Yeah, Scipio the Brave's mom, guys, legend on the streets, taking that pipe. I told you he wasn't American, guys. He's some little Russian Fanuc. I don't know what's up with them saying hi. I've been wondering that myself. Anytime I see someone with that little hi thing, I already know it's a troll. I don't know what it is. It's almost like YouTube is warning you this is gonna be a troll when they put that said hi thing. But I'm gonna ban them because Scipio, you still enjoying that BBC every night? That's what you enjoy over there in St. Petersburg. That's what you enjoy, that BBC, importing it straight from you've been importing that BBC straight from Sierra Leone, don't you? Them blood diamonds up your ass. That's what you like, isn't it, Scipio? You Russian mutt. Scipio's the brave, guys. He's brave for taking that bold BBC. So everyone, wave farewell to Scipio. He has to go now. It's about time for his dick appointment. He can't disappoint. So he's doing it for the love of the game. He can't reach that Guinness World Book of Records of BBC up his ass unless he lays loyal to his customers. So everyone say goodbye to Scipio because the last time you'll see him on this channel. You got that, Scipio? You got that? You got that? You got that pumpkin? You got that? See, unfortunately, your health, your education system ain't worth a shit in Russia. All y'all know how to do is play chess and take BBC up the ass. Just ask Tasha. And tell Anna Karenina, your mother, the little Russian slut, goodbye for us because we loved her on the streets, man. She was a legend in the game, man. Better than Debbie does Dallas. It was Anna Karenina does every black man ever. Her asshole looked like the Underground Railroad, taking so much BBC. So say goodbye, and maybe one day your Russian Wikipedia will let you know about some black scientists because there's like literally hundreds of them. I've literally had professors who were black scientists. So goodbye. Don't let don't let Ukraine drop something hot on you. You know the way they drop that hot load on your face. And that's it for him. All right, guys. So I'm about to go myself. Good night, Agatha. You ain't bad. You wanted me to roast him, didn't you? That's why. You're a big fan of my rice products? Mm. Well, your mother was a big fan of my dick. Guys, anyone who comes in here this time of night talking trash, they're Fanuc. Pillow biting Fanuc who can't go to bed because they're mentally ill. So, good night, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the chat. If y'all want to continue more about the black fatigue, go ahead and leave it in the comments for me. If you want to support me, you can do so through that Cash App right there you see on your screen pinned to the chat room, or you can drop me a super thanks. Because once this live is done, you can't drop me a super chat or a super sticker or a gem, but you can drop me a super thanks. Also, within the links in the description, you can buy me a coffee, or you can become a member of the channel, and I have some content behind the paywall for members. Other than that, have a good one.